Now, thousands of people went berserk, there's no other word for it, in the streets of Newcastle last night when celebrating or commiserating the closure of the Star Hotel. It certainly was the most amazing incident, and it served to remind us that mass hysteria is not just something we read about overseas. Now, have a look at this film footage.
Just a little too much. For more than 2 hours, the riot did not subside for a moment. And then something happened that was beyond everybody's expectations. 2 police vehicles, which were left abandoned, became raging infernos.
Wow, now that happened in Australia. That is not a scene from an overseas movie. That is not even Mad Max. That's really happened in Newcastle. And some of our people in the audience actually saw it, right? Yes. You were what, watching from over the road? Yeah. Well, so it happened in Australia last night. And from our news department, here's Barry Matheson. Give him a big welcome, folks. I can't believe it. I saw that footage coming through this morning and I could not believe it. I'd heard the radio reports, but to actually see it. What started it all? I mean, the Star Hotel, right? Okay.
It was closing down after a 94-year history, Mike. It was a well-known haunt for all sorts of weird people, homosexuals, transvestites, drug pushers, you name it. It was a big rock music venue as well.
It was a real
It was a pretty
pub.
colourful sort of a hotel, and therefore they had 2,000 or 3,000 people turn out last night to give it a big send-off. But at 10 o'clock, the police moved in, and to the letter of the law, wanted that hotel closed right at 10. Now, a lot of people are criticising the police for being so adamant in closing it down at 10 o'clock, and they say that this is what provoked the riot. They say if they'd let the drinkers perhaps spill out onto the roadway for another 15, 20 minutes, half an hour maybe, instead of applying the letter of the law so rigidly, well then perhaps it wouldn't have happened. But then again, the police maintained that they were blocking the road. They started throwing stones, and they had to move in and uphold the law, and that's when it all started.
I just don't know what started that incident where the police car was turned over.
Well, they became angry with the police. The police had to take cover. That's why, as you heard the reporter there, the female reporter say, the police car was abandoned because the police had to duck for cover.
Yeah.
And that was when they got the car, turned it over, ignited it, and then went along to the paddy wagon. And if you saw right at the end of that film...
We're just watching the part where the car's being turned over again here, so now there was... I wondered if there was anyone in there at the time, but there wasn't. What I can't believe is that no one was hurt. I mean, no one was killed in this conflagration, because you can see the petrol pouring out there. Did someone throw a match in to start it, or was it...
Evidently, Mike. We have not been able to find out just who did it.
It's a wonder that 30, 40 people weren't killed.
Well, in the back of that paddy wagon, there were 3 people who'd been arrested. And had they not rescued them in time, unlocked the van.
The police rescued
That's
them,
right.
yeah, right.
As you'll probably see in a few minutes, or in a few seconds, I should say, the police actually run to the rear of the van and unlock the back, surrounded by flames, which is a pretty brave act too, because it could have exploded.
You watch them come in here, folks. Now, for those people who rubbish police, have a look at the bravery of these guys coming in here now. Look at them. Now, they are going to rescue 3 guys who a few minutes ago were kicking them and resisting arrest.
That's right.
And they were saving the lives of those guys.
Exactly. And in total, there was something like 2,000 people in the riot. The police are saying somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000, but we'll say around about the 2,000 to 3,000 mark. There were 30 arrests, 2 females, and 28 men. And if you noticed in the introduction of that film, where you saw all the people running riot, it's amazing to me to see the number of youngsters in the crowd, girls and boys. Some of them looked about 15 or 16
Yes,
to me.
exactly, yeah. Their parents were probably at the club getting booze.
It just goes to show you what alcohol does, and in a crowd, when it becomes unruly.
Yeah.
I mean, that looked like Northern Ireland instead of Newcastle, Sydney. Newcastle, Australia.
How long did the battle continue?
2 hours. I mean, that's an awful long time.
How many police were injured?
There were 30 police, no, I'm sorry, I'll correct myself. There were 30 arrests, there were 15 police injured. One of them had his jaw broken and is apparently still in Newcastle hospitals recovering today. But the others suffered minor injuries. But I understand up in Newcastle, though, I've just been talking to the news people at NBN3, who incidentally shot that film, and I think they deserve a big hand for that.
They certainly do. Let's give that footage. If that footage doesn't win a Logie next year, I'd like to know why. I mean, it's most amazing.
It's for a cameraman to be involved right in the midst of something like that, Mike, is quite frightening. But he does his job, and he did it pretty well.
Yeah.
NBN News cine cameraman Barry Nancarrow has been awarded the annual prize for news film presented by the Australian Cinematographers Society. Barry received the award, trophy and the accompanying scroll at a special function in Sydney over the weekend. His entry was film he shot on the night of the Star Hotel riot last September. We can't show you his prize-winning effort because people charged over the melee are still appearing before the courts. Today, Barry spoke with his usual modesty about his award.
I think it's every newsman's dream, Ray, to be sort of on the spot when it's all happening. It's a very lucky thing, actually. On that night, Robin and I just happened to be the crew that were rostered, so we were in the middle of it. Had another crew been on the job, I'm sure, they would have had just as much to do and as much to record as we did. And, it's everybody's dream. Just for me, I just happened to be lucky to have it come true on that night.
How did you feel at the time, though? Did you feel that his award-winning stuff coming up?
Oh, no. Oh, no, you're not thinking of that. You're thinking of what's happening, are you getting it, what's going to happen next. You don't think about that, and then you start to worry, is it all going to come off the processor all right?
With the night itself, were you ever worried you might get hurt?
I don't know, I never thought about it, to be honest. I thought, you get hit with a can or two, but you don't think about that, just keep doing it.
Well, congratulations to you, and it's a great honour to you, of course, but to regional television.
Yeah, well, no, not just to me, but to the whole crew that were involved in that night, with Rob and Steve, our processing guy, and all the backup that we had and have had it ever since as part of a news team. It's been great.
Good on you, Barry, and he could be in line for another award next weekend. He's a nominee for the Logies. Best of luck.
For you, first up, the best news report. The final nominees are the Rose Bay Siege, Channel 10 in Sydney.
Then time for the tear gas. 8 canisters were fired into number 13 Domeric Street in a bid to force the gunman out. There was smoke from the tear gas as the life riskers of the police force stormed the stately 3-storey home.
The anti-Vietnamese demonstration, BTQ 7 Brisbane.
Then the 2 men who sparked the protests arrived and fists were thrown, but the protagonists were only just restrained. As soon as the 2 Vietnamese trade unionists appeared, the protesting refugees went wild.
The Star Hotel riot, NBN3 Newcastle.
There was an anxious moment when police realised there might have been offenders in the paddy wagon. Fortunately, there wasn't.
Terry Hills bushfires, TCN 9 Sydney.
It was clear the fire would not be easily controlled. The wind was gusting from the northwest, peaking to over 20 knots, making the firefighters' job not only uncomfortable, but extremely dangerous.
You have the winner, Greg.
I have it, right here. The winner is From NBN3 Newcastle, Star Hotel Riot.
To be accepted by Robin Wade, the reporter, and Barry Nan Carrow, the cameraman. We should mention this riot occurred because a hotel was closed down.
So hard waiting for those results. I have one important person to thank, and that's Barry, the man behind this film, for his support and his organisation on the night. NBN Television for the opportunities that they've given me in these early stages of my career, and all those people who were working with us on the night of the Star Riot. I accept this award on behalf of regional television and what it can do.
I'd first of all like to thank, of course, Robin, who stuck with me right through all that night, copped the flak and the beer and everything else. For a young kid, that was a hell of an experience to go through. I'd also like to thank another unsung hero, Neil Bowes, one of our journalists, who stood behind me that night bashing away some of those beer cans. And a young processing guy whose responsibility it was to get that film through in one piece. We're just part of a hard-working news team doing our best to get it to you as it happens. But tonight up in NBN, they've got their fingers crossed. There's a whole pile of people right now in Studio A watching us, hard-working, talented people, for us and for them.
Thank you.
That is their reward as being part of the team that does it all. Thank you all very much, and thank you for your work.
Has this all really happened in Newcastle? At the time, it was hard to believe. For more than 2 hours, the anger and the savageness of the whole scene did not subside for a moment.
It's very easy for you to sit at home and for us to stand here and just watch that sort of thing, and would be very easy to make flippant remarks. Well, no, it's not, because of course that is happening. That's not drama. Well, it is drama, but it's the real thing. The real thing. Incredible.
And the winner from Channel 3 Newcastle, Beating Around the Bush.
The winner is from NBN3 Newcastle, Star Hotel Riot.
This is NBN Television, the winner of 2 TV Week Logie Awards for Beating Around the Bush and the news coverage of the Star Hotel Riot. NBN Television, serving Newcastle and the Hunter Valley.
The Thorne Awards are hotly contested by TV news services across Australia, and the major networks were at the National Press Club in force to hear the Prime Minister announce the winners. Channel 9 journalist Jim Whaley was named the Best News Journalist, but it was Barry Nan Carrow who took the coveted award for news camera work.
I'm very grateful to them. It's this sort of sponsorship that encourages high standards in news work. If I could just say one word on Newcastle's behalf. The riot shocked us all. It's very much out of character with the people of Newcastle. We've not seen anything like that before, and I'm sure we won't see anything like it since. Newcastle is used to hard knocks. This was one of the hardest. We nearly lost our dockyard in '76. It's now a viable concern. Our mining industry is going. Everything's going up in Newcastle. Part of our job up there is to record this and tell it to the people of Newcastle. I am proud and lucky to be able to be associated with such a dedicated team as are working at NBN. I thank you very much.
During the awards, there was some light-hearted rivalry about hour-long news services, which it seems Sydney channels have only recently discovered. When Glenn Cook collected his special commendation, he set the story straight.
Congratulations.
I'd just like to say something. NBN's been doing an hour of news a lot longer than Channel 10 in Sydney.
television news reporting can often be a dangerous and a hazardous business, and to show you what I mean, take a look at this piece of film of the Star Hotel riot in Newcastle last year.
Within minutes of police arriving at the scene, a massive turnout of patrons farewelling the Star Hotel on its final night of trading turned into a terrifying group, hurling cans, broken glass and anything at police. And then something happened that was beyond everybody's expectations. 2 police vehicles, which were left abandoned, became raging infernos. While some of the crowd cheered with excitement, others cried out in dismay. The situation had got out of hand. 2 police vehicles were burnt, spectators, participators and officers were injured. The Star Hotel was left in a pitiful state.
Well, to me that's a frightening piece of film, and I think a sad reflection on certain aspects of society nowadays. The 2 young people who risked their lives getting that piece of film are my guests on the show tonight. From NBN3 in Newcastle, would you please welcome Robin Wade and Barry Nancaro. Nice to see you here in one piece.
Thank you.
Robin, can I ask you to set the scene as much as what was the lead up to that particular night with that hotel? It was closing down.
Yes, it was closing down. For quite a while, the hotel in question considered the closure of the Star Hotel, knowing how important it was to Newcastle, I'm sure. But it became uneconomical to continue the operation of the Star Hotel. And they thought of renovating it and upgrading it, etc. But overall, they decided that it wasn't economical and they had to close it down.
And obviously it had been a popular place for a lot of people over many years.
Very, very popular, yes.
Okay, to switch to night then, Barry, you were on duty at NBN3?
No, both Robin and myself were, yeah.
Yes, and you were booked to go down to actually cover this story.
It was one of 3 jobs we had for that night, which started off rather madcaply out at the Mater Hospital. We did a story on the proposed extensions out there. Then to Beresfield for a meeting on a high school that was suffering a lot of vandalism.
Yes.
And the Star was just one of the other jobs we had to do that night, which...
As far as you're concerned, it's going to be almost a routine sort of job, is it?
We had planned to go down there at some stage during the night, and we thought to ourselves probably the best time to turn up would have been at closing time.
Yes.
And a few minutes before closing time, we started going down there. And when we got there, it was calm and everybody was on the street and drinking and cheering and whatnot. And the police moved in shortly after we arrived.
Do you think something precipitated this action? Was it an action of just a few people in the crowd, or did something spark it off?
I tend to believe to this day that it was a series of circumstances. Maybe if the police moved in later or earlier, it wouldn't have happened. Of course, there were ringleaders on the night.
Do you think people there deliberately intending to make trouble at the start of the evening?
I think they were very emotional. I think, of course, they wanted the Star Hotel to go out in a big way, yes.
Yeah. Barry, you were in the thick of it. You were both in the thick of it, but you were there wielding the camera there. What were your thoughts of being injured?
Didn't think about it, actually.
Didn't think about it?
I've been hit by worse than beer cans.
You were physically hurt, weren't you?
Yeah. Oh, hurt's a relative term. No, a few bumps and bashes, but, you sort of get used to it.
What were the injuries in the crowd that night? Because that piece of film where we see
some of the guys actually, one of the big guys got fairly cut about. I'll leave his name out of this stage. I think I know who he was.
Yeah.
And he at one stage had an ambulance attending him. In the middle of it all, stood up and raised his hand and was just pouring blood.
It's amazing to look at that film and see where the police ran to the paddy wagon.
Police suffered fairly extensively in themselves. I remember seeing one guy with a gash in his head. I know another gentleman to this day has still got problems resulting from injuries he received that night.
It's amazing it wasn't worse when you see that car in flames.
Incredibly amazing, actually.
Yeah.
But there wasn't people actually hurt. I'm just wondering what had happened had the riot not stopped after the cars had gone up.
Mm. What will happen next time you receive a telephone call for something like this? Will you think about this and hesitate, or...?
Never hesitate.
You'll never hesitate.
It's the name of the news game. You just don't stop and think. You go to it first and worry about it later.
Mm. One of the nice bylines from this, of course, has been the fact you've won many awards from this piece of coverage. What have they been?
Barry has won 3 awards,
3 awards
because of this coverage, yes.
Well, no. 2 and 1 shared.
2 and 1
we shared
that. I think we have a shot. Actually, it's the Logie Award. This is the first time I think a regional station has won a Logie Award for a news report.
Gathering, yes.
Mm. And it's always also been distributed through England and America.
50 stations overseas, I think.
Yes, overseas stations.
Yeah.
All that.
What does your sort of family feel about this? Because you're married with a son. What was their
My
reaction?
son wasn't born at that stage.
He wasn't born? What does your pregnant wife think about it then?
She didn't know anything much either. She was waiting for me after work at about 1 o'clock and said, listen, what are you doing? You're still at work, you finished work an hour ago. I said, oh, we've had a small problem. She said, oh, yeah, no, there's something on downstairs. And aren't you coming home now? I said, not quite, dear. I'll be home when I see you, which was about 11 o'clock the next morning.
The next morning.
When you finished and you got back to the studio, did you feel a tremendous sense of relief of what you escaped from?
Oh, no. We were still pumping with adrenaline at that stage, of course.
Really?
I think we started to reflect on the situation probably after the first piece of film went to air on the breakfast news that following morning. And we, for the first time, stood back and looked at it. And I sort of said, Barry.
Were we there?
Where was that?
Yes.
Were we there?
Were you right beside Barry?
Yes, as much as I could. Barry was, I feel in a way he spent too much time worrying about me because he kept on turning around saying, where is she? Where is she? Where's Robin? Where's Robin? And even at one stage, a couple of the policemen tried to protect me, and I did all I could to get away from them because they were the firing line.
Yes, indeed.
I had a lot of trouble convincing them of that.
Well, we're delighted you are with us tonight and all in one piece, as I said before. Would you please thank Robin and Barry?
NBN News.
This Saturday marks 30 years since the Star Hotel riot, which made headlines around the world. The closure of the legendary venue saw 3,000 angry people take to the streets in 1979. Now the riot's being remembered through a new exhibition.
It's an infamous chapter in Newcastle's history. Star Hotel patrons turned violent as authorities moved in to shut the popular night spot down.
A lot of it is social tension. The pub was seen as a pub for minorities. It was a place where they could relax and go over the top if they wanted to.
An exhibition of images, stories and artwork opens tomorrow and includes award-winning photographs and NBN News footage to mark the 30th anniversary of the riot, and the venue is rather fitting.
A lot of the people that were arrested during that riot ended up in our back cell here at the Lockup Cultural Centre. We used to be the police station.
Former NBN News cameraman Barry Nancaro was right in the thick of the action. His footage was broadcast across the globe, and for him, that fateful night shift became a career highlight.
About 10 to 10 we said, oh, I suppose we'd better go down and just have a look at what's going to happen with the pub closures. Well, we sort of parked over the road and that was as far as we got. All blew up virtually from the minute we arrived. So.
As well as targeting police, rioters showered him in beer and hurled cans in his direction.
You got one eye up to the viewfinder and this eye is sort of wandering around saying, what's coming from left of field.
But he managed to keep the camera rolling to record the irate patrons and a police car exploding in flames. The exhibition runs
Turned to 1979 and an infamous city riot that made international news. Hostilities between police and patrons boiled over at the closure of the popular Star Hotel. And an NBN News team found itself in the middle of a running street battle.
On the evening of the 19th of September 1979, the Star Hotel was due to close for the final time. But when police moved in and ordered patrons out early, things turned nasty.
Within minutes of police arriving at the scene, a massive turnout of patrons farewelling the Star Hotel on its final night of trading turned into a terrifying group, hurling cans, broken glass and anything at police. something happened that was beyond everybody's expectations. 2 police vehicles, which were left abandoned, became raging infernos. Some of the crowd cheered with excitement, others cried out in dismay. The situation had got out of hand.
Barry Nancarrow captured those images and is still haunted by some of the sights and sounds.
Hear that girl? Yeah. That has stuck with me. That scream is what I identify with the whole thing. It's just stuck with me. I've gone.
But looking back, he says he never feared for his own safety.
I call it luck, Paul. I've had this innate belief that, well, if I had a camera on my shoulder, I was immortal. So I'd take anything on with a camera. That common sense would say, gee, you shouldn't do that.
All of Australia was talking about the riot the next day when the pictures aired on the Mike Walsh show.
Wow, now that happened in Australia. That is not a scene from an overseas movie. That is not even Mad Max. That's really happened in Newcastle.
And it wasn't long before Barry's pictures started winning awards.
NBN News cine cameraman Barry Nancarrow has been awarded the annual prize for news film presented by the Australian Cinematographers Society.
You know, it's everybody's dream. Just for me, I just happen to be lucky to have it come true on that night.
How did you feel at the time, though? Did you feel that here's award-winning stuff coming up?
Oh, no. Oh, no, you're not thinking of that. You're thinking of what's happening, are you getting it, what's going to happen next.
Good on you, Barry, and he could be in line for another award next weekend. He's a nominee for the Logies.
The winner is, from NBN3 Newcastle, Star Hotel Riot.
This is to be accepted by Robin Wade, the reporter, and Barry Nancarrow, the cameraman. We should mention this riot occurred because a hotel was closed down.
I accept this award on behalf of regional television and what it can do.
We're just part of a hard-working news team doing our best to get it to you as it happens.
We prided ourselves on being regional, but we saw ourselves as competing with the capitals. So this took us up to that level and said, well, just because it's in Sydney doesn't mean it's everything. And this gave regional television a real voice to say, unfortunately for the wrong reasons, if you like, just because we're regional doesn't mean we can't match it with you.
An incredible night, captured through the lens of an NBN camera.
Sure was. Still stunning, isn't it, all these years on? Well,
it was a night Newcastle would rather forget, but it's also a critical moment in the city's history. In the lead-up to the 40th anniversary of the infamous Star Hotel riot, never-before-seen footage has been uncovered as part of a new documentary.
September 19th, 1979. It denied Barry Nancarrow will never forget. The former NBN News cameraman was called out to what he thought would be a run-of-the-mill job and found himself caught in the middle of a perfect storm.
Going back in time, we had no idea, Robin and I, back then, that this was a piece of history in the making.
Patrons turned violent as authorities moved to close the popular night spot. A story told from the perspective of those who lived through it in a new documentary.
There's a bond that exists between them, even though some of them have never met because they were there at that moment.
During the making of the documentary, more of Barry's award-winning camera work was unearthed.
There was a guy called Trevor Dare who was a fan of the band The Heroes, who played on the night. And he had it, and he just said, yeah, I'll send it over to you.
It was a whole chunk of material with the fireys and that hosing down the participants, and I'd completely forgotten about that.
An infamous chapter of the city's history, revisited 40 years on.
I just think Glenn has done a remarkable job pulling it all together, because there are so many threads, so many stories.
The documentary will air next Saturday. Georgia Anderson, NBN News.
40 years ago today, one of Australia's largest ever riots broke out in the streets of Newcastle.
When police pulled the plug on the Star Hotel, all hell broke loose, sparking clashes that made national headlines and even spawned a Cold Chisel song.
Roll the archives and go back 40 years to Newcastle's most infamous night. The riot planted the Steel City firmly on the national map. Every second caught on film by NBN News cameraman Barry Nancaro.
I just couldn't comprehend it. I just kept the camera rolling and thinking, what happens next?
As mesmerising today as it was 4 decades ago. The soon-to-be dad ignored all thought for his own safety to capture the unforgettable footage.
Probably two moments, or two or three. One was the bashings that went on both sides, and the other was when the whole thing blew up in flames. I was staggered. I thought, hang on, what just happened?
The Logie Award-winning Vision has become the centrepiece of a labour of love for a group of ex-NBNers in a project to digitally archive every piece of television produced by the station.
Start the tape.
A treasure trove of stories and faces from our small screen past.
Because I love it. It's history. And I love history. And it's, you know, you see, yeah, Melinda
school.
Yes, Melinda Smith years ago. Still as pretty as ever.
All the people of this region watched themselves on NBN for over half a century. And that's what, to me, has to be protected.
And on days like today, we owe those men and women behind the lens for filming history.
Wasn't aware of it at the time. It was sort of happening, and you're sort of in the middle of it, just concentrating on what's going on and wondering whether or not you got it.
Stephen Mount, NBN News.
It's a wonderful project.
Yeah, it's still incredible to see that, isn't it?
Incredible.
It was a legendary night in the music industry for all the wrong reasons. 40 years ago, thousands of young people rioted in Newcastle over the closure of the popular live music venue, the Star Hotel. Police were assaulted and cars set on fire. The images were shocking. Now the story is a little more complete. The makers of a new documentary have uncovered never-before-seen film of that infamous evening.
It was the rock and roll riot that put Newcastle on the map. The violence erupted when a handful of police tried to enforce a 10 p.m. live music curfew on a crowd of 4,000. Barry Nancaro was a cameraman for the local NBN News.
It's really eerie and weird to look back on stuff that you shot so long ago.
This 22 minutes of raw footage was previously lost to history.
I just forgot all about it because it just became so focused on the 6 minutes that was the television story and completely forgot about all the other stuff.
It's been uncovered by a documentary filmmaker who used social media to track down new material and stories.
A Facebook site called Lost Newcastle. 45,000 members just discuss and argue about the past.
The lost footage reveals that fire hoses were used in a desperate attempt to subdue the crowd.
The firemen have refused to do it. And then they started getting hit with rocks and they're like, well, bugger that. And the cops and everyone were hitting people with the hoses.
Also unearthed was forgotten audio from the ABC archives recorded by Double J's Marius Webb, who was there to report on the Star's closure.
It's like something you'd see in Southeast Asia or Belfast. The police are rushing forward.
The Star Hotel of today is almost unrecognisable. Its pub rock roots have given way to a restaurant, a chic laneway bar and apartments.
If this happened now, the policing would be different. You would close off the street, you'd have portaloos, you'd have mid-strength beer.
And you'd be hard-pressed to see scenes like this again. Ben Millington, ABC News, Newcastle.